This week on ILTV Insider, the U.S. has barred Palestinian leaders from entering for the UN General Assembly next month, just as a unilateral Palestinian statehood announcement is on the agenda. Could Washington's move derail those plans?
Kudos to President Trump. Why? Because this is a signal not just to the Palestinian Authority. I mean, we don't need to signal them. They're terrorists and ties. We know it. Everybody knows it. Deny it. It's true, though. But it's a signal to the European countries. It's saying, you guys, you think you count. You think your symbolic gesture about recognizing some state that doesn't exist, even called it a kind of imaginary state or something like that. No. America is the only country right now that counts. And America is on Israel's side. And America is not going to let you guys get away with it.
Dan, respond.
I think this is one of those cases where more or less everybody's wrong. Unlike much of what the Trump administration does, it isn't actually illegal or in contravention of existing treaties. But it's against the spirit of the 47 agreement, where America essentially agreed to let in more or less anyone in exchange for being the host of the UN. Now, that anyone involves UN member states. And the technicality that makes this okay is that Palestine is not a UN member state. It's an observer. It's been recognized by the UN General Assembly. It's murky and messy, and you can say it's not a member state. Is it wise? Oh, I don't know. It attaches to a lot of nonsense like that the PA is as terroristical as Hamas. This is very bad for Israel to go down this path. It's untrue, and it closes off Israel's only path to eventually separating from the Palestinians, which is, indeed, to reach an accommodation with the Palestinian Authority. Moreover, it won't change the recognition drive, which I, like Ruthie, think is mistaken, because it'll strengthen Hamas. And strengthening Hamas is the best way to avoid a Palestinian state. Because Israel will never take the risks needed to disengage from the West Bank if that might entail Hamas taking over and doing it on October 7th from the more strategic West Bank. So I'm not a fan of the recognition bandwagon, but I really don't see what it accomplishes to block Mahmoud Abbas from attending. It violates the spirit of America's hosting the UN, and it won't prevent these countries, not enemies of Israel, but misguided in this case, from going ahead with the recognition.
Okay, now, Jen, you've actually been on the show many times, and you are a big proponent of saying the PA is the lesser of the two evils. That's and right. You talk about Hamas and the PA, and that maybe they should even be helicoptered into Gaza and, in fact, take over the Gaza Strip when all of this is said and done. So, that doesn't seem to be part of America's plan. So how do you respond to that? At this stage, it's very clear.
Not everything this administration says actually is its policy that they will stick with. Some of it is fantastical and for show and theatrics. Moreover, even when they intend to do what they say they're going to do, sometimes it works well and sometimes it's misguided.
So I think a lot of this is about optics, and optics are important here. And the optics are that this recognition is about rewarding terrorism. And I think it boosts the Hamas, even amongst the Palestinians. And even worse, there's nothing being asked of the Palestinians. They are not being said, well, if you want a state, you're going to have to recognize a Jewish state, or that a right of return is going to be to a new Palestinian state, or that at the end you're going to have to sign an end of conflict agreement that says everything is done, because people think this is territorial. I don't believe this is a territorial issue. So you must ask something for a Palestinian state here. And all of these people, they're not only lining up now about statehood. You even talked about Belgium. They are also talking about sanctioning Israel. So what is this message about terrorism and about doing this to a democracy? And so it's important for the United States, maybe Israel's only friend in the world, maybe bar Germany, to speak up.
Well, I have spoken to European officials about this, and I've been fairly vocal in my view that agrees with you that this strengthens Hamas and appears to reward terrorism. So even if you favor a two-state solution with a demilitarized Palestinian state, which I most certainly do, partly to save Israel demographically, you don't want this to happen at this time because it strengthens Hamas. Their position is rather interesting. Beyond what we may maybe somewhat cynically assume is a desire to placate domestic leftist opinion and maybe local Islamist constituencies, they say that the Arab League demanded this of them as a quid pro quo in exchange for something very, very important that the Arab League actually did, which was received in Israel with a somewhat odd indifference, which was a call I think it was about 6 weeks ago,
Right, to not have
on Hamas to disarm.
Yeah.
Now, this is unbelievably important that this should also come from Qatar. You say optics have value. You say signals and symbols have value. What could be a bigger signal than Qatar joining the other Arab countries and calling on Hamas to disarm, which is absolutely a precondition for any discussion of further territorial concessions or deals with the Palestinians?
Ruthie, do you want to
I think it's a big mistake to decide that Hamas is, let's say, Jack the Ripper and the PA is the Boston Strangler. And we think that strangulation is less problematic. There's less blood, etc. So, look, Hamas, the people in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, which some people call the West Bank, but I don't, they are raised from in their mother's milk on textbooks and in the mosques, etc., about killing Jews, about martyrdom, all of this stuff. It's the same education that Hamas in Gaza receives that the kids in the PA received. They're still funding terrorism and terrorist families. And it's interesting because though Fatah, the PLO, and Hamas are deadly rivals, they, on this issue, they're in lockstep about rewarding terrorism. They honor martyrs all over Judea and Samaria. In the PA, sports arenas are named after terrorists. They are, until they change their whole way of looking at the education, there is no chance, certainly not for a two-state solution. And they don't want a state. They just want to destroy the state of Israel.
You may respond quickly.
Yes, this isn't strangulation versus knifing. This is pancreatic cancer versus a broken leg. Okay? The PA is extremely imperfect. There are basically two things. One is they provide funds to the families of people arrested by Israel, some of whom are big-time terrorists. This is a political need that they feel. I don't like it. It can be seen as rewarding terrorism, but it's not exactly funding terrorism, as you regrettably said. Second, indeed, the textbooks that the PA prints do not encourage peace. That's clear, and that needs to change. And I agree with everyone who says that at a minimum, if you're going to recognize Palestine, make demands such as a change in these two things, particularly the textbooks. But to compare the PA, that every Israeli general will tell you does all they can to collaborate on security and prevent terrorism in the West Bank, and has recognized the principle of a two-state solution. And you can say all you will about Abbas, but he said things that make it clear that he is a partner. And to compare them to Hamas, whose charter calls for the destruction of Israel and whose entire ethos is jihadistic and who just launched a global historic massacre against Jews on October 7th, honestly, forgive me, is folly.
Okay, so I want to move us actually to then what could be the next steps. I mean, you've said, as we mentioned, we could helicopter the PA, some revised PA into Gaza, but Trump has another vision. Trump actually wants to see the Gaza Riviera. It'll be very nice. We saw the AI renderings. I want to go live there too. And I'm wondering, if this is even a feasible plan. I mean, Eric, you've been to the West Bank. I mean, all of us have actually been to Judea and Samaria, the West Bank areas, and seen the way the PA is taking care of their own territories. A little bit dirty, buildings aren't so in such great shape, water issues, food issues, whatever, roads. How is this Riviera going to happen in Gaza? Is it possible, given the mass amount of destruction that is there right now and the number of Gazans we'd have to get out of the area to build it?
So separating the Gazan population, the civilian population, from the terrorists, that ship has sailed, I think. That should have happened under the Biden administration. The Biden administration was basically slowing or cutting off arms to Israel. It's late now. Trump seems to be part of it. The world is totally against it. They call it ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, genocide, all these other things. So Israel has not gone into Gaza City. Israel has not gone into the central refugee camps. And there are still tens of miles of tunnels. And they're planning for the Israeli soldiers to go in. And if they go in slowly, it's going to be, the world will turn more against it. If they go in fast, more casualties. So it gets, who's going to go in and control this area? My country? As soon as the first body bags go home of American soldiers or contractors, Americans going to lose their appetite for taking this over.
Trump is saying, come on, get this over with, meaning win it, not get it over, surrender to Hamas. No. Get it over with now. Let's get this moving. Israel will have some kind of military control over it for the foreseeable future, and with the United States, some kind of entity with other Arab states probably helping in some capacity. Again, it's a long process, but it does sound doable. We didn't think the Abraham Accords would be doable. There are a lot of things we didn't believe in.
We knew they were doable. There was no actual enmity with the countries of the Gulf.
Except they all with the nonsense of saying, no, peace only goes through the Palestinians, and if we don't have a two-state solution.
You know the saying, the enemy of the good is the excellent. And as I'm always saying, the less bad option, the broken leg. It was clear to me from the beginning that Israel is refusing a solution that basically deploys the only existing alternative brand to Hamas in Gaza, which is indeed the PA, for political reasons. Because the Israeli government is controlled by the far right that wants to occupy Gaza, to expel the Palestinians, and to resettle Gaza with Jews. That's not the policy of the government, but they can't articulate an alternative policy without risking the collapse of the government, which at this point is reckless that they don't risk that because they have to. I always knew the result would be a forever war. That's where we are. But the absurdity is that we are almost 2 years in the future and they still haven't even begun to discuss the day after. And there really is only one. Hold on, Ruthie. It's not a solution. There is no solution here. And by the way, death and taxes are coming for all of us. There's no solution, but there's a less bad option. And it's clear what it needs to be. Israel needs to say that the PA is going to be restored, but with maximal help, probably in a situation analogous to what we have in the West Bank, where, as you said, some version of a military occupation will continue for a while, but a civilian Palestinian government with reforms that will be demanded of them, and one with maximal assistance by the Arab League, by the Persian Gulf countries, which have about $100 billion in escrow ready to give them, by whatever assistance can be done without risking body bags from the Americans and NATO and the Europeans. And hold on. It's true. It's true that this won't work well if what remains of Hamas remains in Gaza. But what needs to happen is the world to put this on a platter and say, people, this is what's going to happen if Hamas disarms and its leadership goes. Of course, they will refuse. But the entire region will face this dichotomy where either not a Riviera, but a real reconstruction process with the Palestinian government reformed and improved with maximal assistance, with Israeli security control.
And America for a decade.
And maybe rebuilds Gaza versus continuing to leave Hamas degraded as it is, ruling the smoldering ruins of Gaza. And by the way, they allow people to leave, not with ethnic cleansing, but as Ukrainians left, with the right to go back when there's something to go back to. So Hamas will face a depopulation of Gaza, no reconstruction, and the choice of whether they disarm or not. When the entire Arab League, the entire West, probably even China, is calling on them to do this, and polls will start showing that 95% of the Palestinians want this. I'm not so pessimistic that this is not a better path.
Eric, all we have done is tried. All we've done is add to territorial withdrawals and asked for peace, etc.
And settled the half million
Jews. You want my final line is no Palestinian state, not now, not ever. Whatever that entity will be, whatever it's gonna be, if you call it a Palestinian state, what you're talking about is a jihadist ideological entity that cannot be allowed to run things, and certainly Israel should not make deals with it. That's what I'm saying. It would be like saying, let's make a deal with the Ayatollahs in Iran. No. Yes, it's true. There are Iranians, maybe you can. At this moment, though, as Eric pointed out, in the Palestinian Authority, if you're talking about the population and not the leadership, they're all Hamas. But of course they are.
No, they're not.
You're talking about, okay, fine. Some are Islamic Jihad and some are Fatah.
It's not true.
And Fatah, they say we need to annihilate the Jewish state.
It's not true. It's not true, and we shouldn't. Just because you repeat it doesn't make it true. Public opinion among the Palestinians is complex, and there are many shades. And the PA has been corrupt and is unpopular. That's obviously true. But when the PA lost an election in 2006, the reason was because the non-jihadi forces were split. Hamas never won a majority. It was never for the executive. And if there was a vote today, a real vote, almost no Gazans would vote for Hamas. The West Bank currently is reacting to the mania of the settlers that are enabled by the current government. Everything is distorted. But if there was a clear choice, I doubt very much that Hamas would win. And you know what? I'm not even putting it to an election. I'm saying it should be
last
imposed.
Statement, because we're going to run out of time. So we don't have any more time for everybody to respond. We didn't even get to talk about the Houthis, but in the end, we can see that there's actual chaos. But certainly the United States is aligning more with Ruthie's perspective, and that the European countries are obviously aligning more with yours. To be determined. We'll see what happens in September.